All right, everyone. So Unleash the Potential. We're back. Obviously, under the circumstances, we're in a little bit of a different setting. Lucky to have Matthew Caldaroni from so Matt, and are you in Toronto right now?
Yeah, Toronto right now.
So he's in Toronto right now. Resilience coach, mind body fusion. I heard him speak at an NSCA conference a few years ago, and just had a lot of really good stuff. And I thought, what better guest to get on our show than someone that could talk about that a little bit. So, Matt, if you want to kind of start up, if you want to talk a little bit about, kind of how. So one of the things I saw was so you were a soccer goalie coming up, and so the mindset piece kind of makes sense with being a goalie.
Absolutely, man, dude. It was a different animal. So kind of where I started with all of this stuff. First off, man, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. But looking at it, so where we started with everything here, I was a soccer goalie. Obviously, that was trying to make it in his own respect. And, I often say, man, my story with resilience starts way before the actual pro sports world. My whole story, man, started when I was about 12 years old. I had a coach, who told me I would never be able to make it at the pro level. And that's when my real story with resilience started. I actually ended up keeping a journal of the things that I was doing and how I was tapping into it, how I was pushing the motivation, how I was, guiding my thoughts, my mentality towards it, the different habits that I had kind of going through it. And then, I got to push myself and got a scholarship when I was about 17 years old to Ontario Tech U in Oshawa, Ontario. And then from there, man, it kind of all just took off. I got a couple accolades there in my freshman year, and I thought, let's really push this thing even further. Got a very brief, I guess you could say off-season training stint with Toronto FC for about a week and a half, 2 weeks that I was there. And then decided, to heck with this. I want to even try and go further with it. So I saved up some cash in the summer, man. Called my uncle in Italy and actually got a tryout over there with the team, and it went really well. Nice. What the problem being though, man, was that, I lacked the mental skills or what we call now the resilience skills to really push it to the next level and to keep taking it. So for me, man, that was my biggest limiting factor, I think, when I was over there. And that ultimately inspired me to start a company when I got back here that not was just, sports psych, because I think there's a bit of a difference. Well, I know there's a bit of a difference with it in regards to just the practices that they involve. I saw a lot of sports psychologists. I got a lot of great clinical information that I needed for myself in regards to, emotions and all that kind of stuff. But I really needed, for lack of a better term, somebody to walk up to me and kick my ass and help me teach myself how to do that consistently, and to push through the barriers, and to make sure that it wasn't just, something to do with the target setting side and the visualizing, although those are great. I needed skills to adapt. That's what it was. I needed skills to push myself. So lo and behold, I read a book by Tim Grover, the great Tim Grover, Relentless. And I was super inspired by hearing about MJ and the way he thought, and Kobe and the way he thought, and Tim Grover on how that unique individual thought as a person. And, it ultimately helped me understand there was a different side of performance, which was all to do with mental skills and life habits. And that's where we met in the middle and started focusing heavily our studies on resilience and what resilient individuals did, from the way they lived life to the way they thought, to the way they acted, to everything they ultimately did with a purpose. And now we're here. We started Mind Body Fusion in 2015, and my brother came on board in about 2016. And we've helped served just over 5,200 athletes, ranging from the youth to pro level across multiple sports, man, to tap into these resilient skills. So it's been a wild, awesome ride so far. A lot of great days and a lot of beautiful days filled with adversity that's allowed us to grow. But we're on a great path, man. And I'm more excited about the next 5 years than I've ever been in my life.
Well, it's interesting too, because, being in the field, it's, so many people you talk to about the mind performance piece, and they just look at it as, no, I just got to lift a little more. I got to work out a little harder. So how do you deal with that? Because especially in the past 5 years, I feel like that's one of the things that guys, I think it's, again, not to speak for you, but I think it's people are starting to open up to a little more.
Absolutely.
In the past 5 years, I talked to Vinny Maltz as well, and And one of the things that he's talked about in the past 5 years, like he coming up through this whole thing, it's like, it's one of the toughest areas to kind of break through for people to understand that you're not broken.
Yep.
That there's a different, it's a different piece that you need to develop and get stronger and that kind of thing. So
100%, man. You know what? It's like, honestly, Key, we talk a lot about, so we do a great job in the sports world of teaching athletes everything they need to know about their body physically, right? Or the majority of it. Not everything. There's always stuff to be learned, but we know, like, let's be real. If athletes have been working with a professional like yourself for, 5 years, they usually have a good idea on how to program, even if they had to for themselves, right? How to build muscle, what to do. So you know how to build muscle. You know that if something happens to you in performance physically, how to fix it. You go see the AT or whoever it might be. You know how, if you fall and cut your arm or your elbow or something, put a Band-Aid on it. But then it always comes to the question, well, how do you become more focused? How do you become a tougher mentality? How do you build, that ability to keep pushing? And that's usually where a lot of athletes get stumped. And there's a problem there because even, looking at it, man, in society, we've blown up this mental health, and it's important, very important, but almost to a fault at times where it becomes, seen as a weakness instead of a strength. Like, I don't know any top individual in life, we're not just talking sports, but in the business world, right, that doesn't work on the mental side of what they do, from as simple as reflecting to understanding skills like we provide for athletes to, finding different motivational triggers for themselves. Like, it's a true, real part of performance. Although you can't touch it, you right, can 1,000,000% see it. And it's reflected in, at least from the work we do, it's reflected in the dying embers of a game. It's reflected when you don't want to move and get doing something. It's reflected during the times of adversity like we're in right now. This is where you can see who's been training this side of performance and who hasn't, right? So I would say, man, 100% that I'm happy because a lot more athletes I've noticed. When I remember 5 years ago when we started this animal, it was all about convincing people on why the mental game was so important. Now it's all about showing them that we actually have a specific pathway for them, instead of, hoping that they just take any kind of general piece of information. Right. So the cool thing is, man, the evolving part of all of this that we've seen is that, now athletes are not only open to it, but they're intrigued by it and they want to see it, and they'll work with you, but they have to see there's a plan, just like for the gym. Right. So it's totally there, man. It's totally being received now by teams and players. And it's great because now I think we're going to see a whole new generation or species of athletes. Like The Last Dance just came out on Netflix, right? Which has been something that a lot of people see Michael Jordan and it's like, wow, Michael. But man, you look at some of those individuals, like, yes, MJ was unbreakable, but man, just look at how some of those guys thought, right? The Scottie Pippen on how he evolved to who he was. Even Dennis Rodman, I loved how they showed Dennis Rodman in that and how he thought different. But man, this mental side of performance is something that's really about to spike, in my opinion. And something where we'll start to see the athletes who have taken advantage of it will get ahead, and the ones that haven't are ultimately going to fall behind until they do.
Yeah, it's funny because people talk about ice in the veins, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that guy just has ice in his veins, man.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, they'll talk smack about this side of it. And that's why, like, I'm so excited to have you on here, because it's a side of, because again, I try to work it into the training piece, because again, it's finding that, the yin, and I know like Tim Grover talks about this as well, like finding that like evil with the good, right?
Yeah.
Mixing it and being able to dig in a little deeper to find that little piece in you. And it's interesting because it makes the biggest difference, right? Like, like guys that, quit on a wind spread. You're like, did you really, you didn't have enough in the tank? Really? Like one? Really? Okay. You're that time. Gotcha. But no, that's really cool. So like, so how is, so how is that kind of, how would you say that kind of changed for you? So at this point, when you're working with guys, because I'm just curious, like, how did you get the first couple guys to get into it? Like,
man, so I'll take you through the story. There was this one individual that we worked with. He still remains a good friend of ours in Toronto when he first started. And man, it was just absolutely being able to watch a game and see when this individual would check out, or at least try to predict the patterns that he did. And you could see it in his performance. He would do certain things and check certain clocks at certain times and this and that. And then you had to track the patterns. And we're not talking over just one game, Key. Like, we're talking about 50 studied games and a 15-page report that I was sending out to agents of players just to try to get them to buy in. And then we pestered the crap out of them. And eventually they said, all right, well, let's see, there's nothing else. Unfortunately, we had to, at the time, go after the athletes that were struggling.
Right.
Thankfully, now that's changed, where a lot of athletes want to better themselves, and it's not a matter of if I'm struggling or not. But that's really how we did it. We had to find the ones that needed this tremendously and have been able to tap into it now, where, you know, on the other side of things, we see athletes that just want something like this so they can better innovate what they're doing.
So and that's an interesting piece too, because, you know, I know for me, when I'm working with guys and gals, but one of the things that I battle with, and I don't even battle with it, because I basically tell guys, I'm like, listen, I'm not a babysitter. Like, here are the things that I need you to do. You either are going to do it, and I'll tell you again, and I'll, you know, obviously I'm going to lead you through it because that's my goal, or that's my job. But we're in this together. So once I see that you're no longer doing what I'm asking you to do, there's just no point for this relationship. Right.
Yeah.
But the most interesting part is how do you, because you said, it's interesting what you said there. You said that, you know, the guys, you have to start off with the guys that are struggling, right? Because that's usually the people that are willing to actually give in.
Yeah.
So how do you work with someone that's, let's say, not like, so their game is good, right? Their game is good. They're right in. How do you get someone like that where things have worked for them, right? Like, they've been successful, they've been crushing it. Like, they're doing really well, right?
Yeah.
But you see that there's more to them, and you know, they come to you. So obviously, like, they see that they want something more. How do you break through someone like that? How do you get them to buy in, you know, from that kind of side?
You know what, man, I'll give you a great example. We've got an individual we work with right now who's about to make his jump from the AHL to the NHL. And this individual's biggest issue this past season was the fact that he had to add a side of aggression to his game that was never part of it. And this is somebody, like, we're talking a player who's made that 1 out of 4,000 players to make it to the NHL. You know what you're doing, right? Ultimately, you do. And the biggest part was, you know, trying to manage and mush that into his head and get that to become part of his identity. And that's hard to do when you're talking to somebody who's already been successful, kind of like you're talking about with the players there that know they're doing the right things. It's part of their game. And now we got to push even more.
Right.
The best thing that I found once we started connecting it to his vision and really understood what he wanted and who he wanted to become and how long he wanted to play in the NHL for, essentially for the long period, it was a matter of, hey man, do you want a 15 to 20 year career? Yes. And you must do this. And I'll show you why. Athletes, man, it's always a funny one because, you know, if we're talking to high performers, the one thing you always got to tap into with their psyche is show them the results. That's the hardest part.
Right.
Especially when we're talking about a game on the mental side, at least, that you cannot really see, like we said, touch, like we said, but you can definitely see it in performance. So when we're looking at it with athletes, the way we get our guys to buy in, essentially, first off, we find out what it really is that means something to them, right? And we're not just talking some fluff vision. I mean the guts of it, the dark sides, the beautiful mix between the dark and the light. And we see what they really want, and we show them, hey, if you do this, this is the exact thing it's going to connect to that you just mentioned here in your vision. If you're not willing to take action on that, it's not a matter of making them feel guilty in any means, but it's by asking them the straight question, do you really want it? Like, I'm showing you a pathway that you're trusting me here with to take. It's up to you. Do you want it or you not? Kind of like you're saying in the gym, right? So we've seen a lot of athletes with that, man. Actually, in fact, we're going through an amazing transition right now where we're helping coaches with, like, strength coaches like yourself, with this mental side to better understand their athletes, right? Because you guys are the best motivators an athlete has. In fact, the strength coach is the one that knows and hears the most from the athletes, especially when they come into your gym. What are they talking about, right? They're talking about things they trust you with. They vent to you guys. You almost become like a form of their therapy, right? So when we're talking about that, man, it's all about figuring out what that vision is and showing that you can connect what you're doing to their vision, and then ask them to trust you. And if you don't, you always put a guarantee on it, right? Give me 30 days. And if it doesn't work, you don't ever have to talk to me again. And usually that's when it's your time to shine as a coach.
Right. You better come through, right?
Exactly, man. You got to put your balls on the line if you want them to trust you.
100%. No, and that, like, that's the buy-in, right? And I think that's the such an important part, because it's, you know, I'm going to give you everything I got. Are you going to give me the same? Because if you're not, then this is just a waste of time. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think kind of that's a nice transition. One of the things that I saw, like, some of the stuff I was looking at with you, so basically helping coaches lead and understand their teams.
Yep.
So, and then you talked a little, and then I just kind of saw you mentioned, through unique resilience rankings.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you talk a little bit about that? So, like, what is that?
Definitely,
how do you guys
man.
do that? And like, how do you help? So,
yeah, 100%. So we see players in 3 kind of rankings, if you will, and it all has to do with their ability to, I guess, not necessarily buy in, but their ability to push themselves and where their drive really comes from. So we've got top 10 percenters that we call them seekers. These are usually about 1 to 3 guys on a team. If we're talking about a 17-man team, we've got limiters, which is usually where we see 80% of the team fall into. And then we've got what we call avoiders, which is the bottom 10%. When it comes to talking about seekers and what they do, these are individuals that are completely internally driven. They're always looking to push the limit. They're always looking to put the team on their back. You don't have to tell them to do it twice. They're the self-starters on the team. And it's funny because they usually come with higher ego than the majority, but they don't do what they do because they want to have a public look. They do what they do because it's internal. So they're able to get to that next level because they don't care about what anybody else thinks. If they have to look stupid doing, ankle movements for the next 40 minutes because that's what a guy like yourself told them to do, they're going to shut the hell up and they're going to do it. That's how they're wired. Then we look at what we call, like I was saying, the limiters, the middle 80 percenters. And these are guys, man, that they're half driven by the internals, but half driven by the externals. And by understanding that, the problem is with them sometimes they want to do really well. They will show up, they will work hard, they'll do what they have to do. But the limiting factor that holds them back which is why we call them limiters, is because they still care too much about what the others think. And they feel that external pressure and they might change how they're doing things because of that. And that holds them back at the end of the day. And then we look for what we call our avoiders, which is the last bottom 10%, usually about 1 to 3 players on a team. These are usually the guys or girls, man, that will absolutely drag down the culture and bog it down on a team. They're externally driven. They will do whatever it takes to avoid pressure or responsibility at all costs. And the problem with that is, man, you're now asking those 2 other levels to constantly pull them up. And funny enough, it's usually what we see pulling back 3 or 4 people because they're sometimes the idiots on the team. So when we're working with them and we test them, we've actually come up with, our 4 pillars of resilience that we have, which is competence, commitment, focus, and toughness. And if from the studies we've done and the research we have and the data to back it, we've seen that any resilient individual, really, these are the 4 main areas that we find. So competence is simply understanding yourself and the strengths that you bring to the table. Commitment is simply understanding if you have a vision and if you're willing to do that vision to its fullest extent, highest standards possible all the time, even when nobody's watching. I hear so many coaches, man, talk about that, right? The soft skills, the things people can't see. That's what we're talking about. And then there's focus, right? You look at the best in the world, they have a focus that's unbreakable, even if they make a mistake. Like Tom Brady, for example, is a great example. How many times have we seen that guy throw interceptions in a Super Bowl final, right? And he's still able to lead his team to the top. Why? Because he's got an unbreakable focus. It doesn't matter what happens. He's internally locked into what he has to do. And the last kind that we say is toughness, right? It's having that ability to adapt when stuff isn't going your way, or to take coaching feedback and to be malleable into what you have to do to make the situation work. Like, man, I think because you talk a lot about it even before when we were speaking, that ability to have somebody just shut up and do it, right? And that shut up and do it all comes down to the toughness. Like, you're not going to get the situation that you want. It's just how it is. Maybe you'll get that 20% of the time, but the best in the world can adapt and they have that toughness too. Let's look at the world even right now, man. No one, if you asked us 2.5 months ago, hey, you're going to be in lockdown for the next however many days and we're not going to tell you when you're getting out, nobody would have even come close to predicting this taking over the way that it has, right? So you'll see the best that are able to kind of adapt here. And when we're talking about these seekers, limiters, avoiders, the seekers, from the test that we put together, it's about 50 questions long. We're able to see where they rank in this competence, commitment, focus, toughness. We're able to put a metric to it. And it's not anything to do with your typical personality testing. I don't care about the personality testing. I care about how they're going to adapt in performance.
Right.
So when we're able to get a gauge and a reading on these, we're able to help the coaches understand how to better coach them and how to better connect with them, which is huge because you got to think about it, man. A player that lacks in a side of focus where they're feeling all of this pressure and there's externals on them and so on, if you start adding on to that, they're going to shut down on you. They're not going to try and step up. Similarly to if you have a player, man, who's not great with toughness and you expect them to take the coaching feedback that you can, and you start your feedback with one wrong word, you can completely set them off. Right. So when we're able to understand these rankings on a team, we actually found a formula, man, that we help every team get to, which is separate them into a 20-80 split and eliminate the avoiders. If we can do that, and we can create more seekers, obviously, by doing the work that we do with them, and create more limiters with the work that we do with them, and having the coaching staff help out as well, we've built a championship winning mindset now, which is ultimately what we help with.
So that's why the Chicago Steel are doing so well, huh?
Man, dude, they're a different – I got to give a lot of credit and praise to them, man. They're a different animal. That culture in there, dude, is unfriggin' breakable. They have individuals in there that are just out of this world in regards to their commitment to what they got to do. They've put such a great framework into that, man, that we've just helped with that extra cherry on top. But it was like, dude, I can never say anything better about those guys. From the family culture they've instilled there to the hard work to the mindset, they are totally they run a strong ship over there that's unbreakable with or without us. We're just an extra piece to what they do. So, man, they've got that mentality behind these seekers, limiters, avoiders. But before we even came into the place, they already knew what they had to do with it. So, absolutely, man. They've got a totally mind down approach, which they're all about, doing what they have to do there with the players mentally, and then they get into it physically, and it's a game over approach for them, man.
Well, I think that's the interesting part is, so for us, we work with a number of, from the youth, the kids, from like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, developing movement, and then, just the different progressions and everything. But right off the bat, you see the guys that are at a young age. They're the bloomers. They're the ones that are the biggest. They're the ones that are the fastest, the most talented at the time. Testosterone kind of hit them a little quicker than the other guys, but they don't know how to deal with adversity. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, people start catching them, and then you really see where's this kid going to go. So I think just kind of the top and jumping on that a little bit. I think it's interesting because kind of as you were talking about, the way you kind of try to get the avoiders out, right? You try to push them out, move them out. However, you kind of, the way you attack that. Mm-hmm. But, in the youth ranks, how, you look at a team, you have, let's say, your 2 top players who they're extremely talented, but they're a cancer, right? Yeah. What would you, just kind of jumping on that.
Yeah, you're hitting a nail on the head, man. You're hitting such a great topic there because you know what? Let's take a look at the youth rankings for a second, okay? Or we'll say youth sport. So youth sport, unfortunately, for a lot of the period, like it is always at the end of the day, a pay-to-play model, right? Where you can be the best AAA player. Of course, we'll find a way if you have to be to bring you onto this team. But ultimately, it's parents playing for it. So you do have a bit of a tougher time cutting a player like that. Right. But we always say it, man, like we're all about identifying and fixing. And this is where really the skill of a coach comes into play, where that, yes, maybe for the following year, if you have to get rid of that cancer on the team, you absolutely can. But right. When you're stuck with one, the question always becomes, what do we do? It goes back to the first point I mentioned, man. It's about finding that vision and getting into their head with it, right? It's understanding their players. Like, man, there can be so much that's fixed with a relationship in anything in life, obviously with communication. Right. And, looking at it a lot of the times too, when we talk to our coaches, especially the elite level ones, they often like to take almost a bit of a pro approach to what they're doing, which they can. But you always got to remember, man, like if you're shutting a door, for example, on a parent or a player and you're refusing contact, you're making it a real tough situation for yourself now to say like, hey, I want little Jimmy there or little Johnny to bend this way for me that I need him to, but I'm not going to communicate it with it or the parents. I'm just going to tell my assistants to hammer it out. It doesn't work that way, right? So when we're looking at that and we do have that avoider that's in a team, especially at the youth rank, it's making actually more time for them versus cutting it off. And when you can have that heart-to-heart, that one-on-one, like now we're kind of talking about getting into the head of the player in a positive way where you find out why they're there. Even if they're there, man, for the bonding experience, right? Youth athletes, that's what we have to consider. You have kids that are there because they want to truly be there, and you have kids that are there because they want to be there for the friends. Right. As long as you speak to what their psyche is, man, their vision and their push, you can get the most out of them. Hey, you want to play on so-and-so's line potentially, or hey, you're here to be boys with that's fine. Let's add on your game while you're doing that, and I'll reward you with more time to do this. It's easy, right? But it's taking that time with a player, understanding why they're there, and then attacking that vision and showing the connection between the two, just like the strength coach would.
Yeah, that's it's just because as you're talking, you know, it's tough because in the youth level, hopefully there's time to fix it, right? And that's
sure.
that's where it comes back to as well is, you know, but I guess like what would be like, what do you like? What would be some ways to kind of attack that? Because I know for me, there's so many teams that I see that, you know, they're like on paper extremely talented, right? Or let's say you take a couple players off because right now the team just is based off of that one player, right?
Yep.
But now if you can actually get all the players to do what they're supposed to do, right? Now all of a sudden you're in such a better situation. And I guess like you said, it's a pay to play model, right? So it's so you, and that's the other part too. Like I don't know how it is in Toronto exactly, but like around us right now, there's a AAA team like 5 miles away from each other. Yeah. Like everywhere you look, there's a AAA. I'm like, there's just not enough people here to have as many AAA teams. But all right, fine. So, you know, and I guess that's where it kind of comes together is you kind of have to take like guys that maybe are AA players or are lower level. But, you know, I guess for me, it drives me insane because I see so many players that like, why are you going for AAA right now, man?
Yeah.
AA player, like develop yourself, get better, get confidence, like, is there some things like for youth players that you would,
yeah, dude. Like so I'll say this, man, you know what? So we always got to remember that whenever we're talking with human beings and we're talking about really getting into them, every human being's brain, man, it's no secret, works to play for a model of safety, right? So you're always going to be coming from the derivatives that if it's not a safe environment, you're not going to do what you have to do. You're going to find a way to figure it out on your own end. So whenever we walk into an organization, especially at the youth level, the first thing we make sure to do is that they have an established vision and an established set of values. That right there is your rule discipline list that you can follow. If somebody breaks those values, and we're not just talking key with like the players. I think there's above and beyond what coaches have to realize, you need to find a unique way to make your parents part of that culture as well. Because you know as well as I do, man, like I throw around the word culture and build a culture lightly. Building a culture is a true skill. It really, really is. And it takes talent. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes really understanding what you want to accomplish and setting out goals and keeping locked on them. But first thing, man, you've got to have a vision as a coach. A vision is something as simple as saying, this is what we want to accomplish together this year. And I'm not just saying win the championship. It wasn't that. You know, looking at a team, for example, as great as a Steel, they're very focused on development. It's not a matter of just win the league. That's like a secondary characteristic of what developing an individual does. And they've mastered that. But I would say having that vision of understanding we're all here for this together. And these are the 4 or 5 rules we play by. So rules are simple, man. It's raising standards. So, you know, I'll give you mind body fusions, for example. We're all about dominate, serve, impact, passion, and resolve. Those are our 5 rules. If you want to be a mind body fusion employee, which we've grown our team now to about 7, if you want to be within this, if you want to be in this family and doing this with us, you must possess these rules. And if you break them, we are going to reprimand you for them. And it's not like, you know, a 1 strike, you're out. Every team should have a 3-strike rule from what we've seen in the successful teams that do. There's always that talking period, right? But it's a culture of safety of, hey, look, these are the rules. This is the vision. And you have them. So you set out those standards. And then the last part I would say, man, everybody needs a role. Everyone. There was a study that was done, man, where they went around top professional leagues in the world. And they took a study where they looked at like the 5%ers of the top 25 percenters in the league, right? So we're talking, it was a combination of stats, ice time or playing time, so on. And they went and they did this over various different leagues. And they asked them a simple question. Do you like to be given direction? With the exception of 5% of all these different leagues, everybody else, 20% in there, that remaining 20 there. So what is it there? 95 said they want to be given direction. That is huge, man, because we're talking about the best players in the world. We're not talking about kids that are developing. If they want to be given direction and roles, kids need to be given the same. And it doesn't matter if their direction or role is to be the force or to be the guy who's bringing energy or whatever it might be.
Right.
You just need to give them a role, and you beat the crap out of that role for the entire year. Remember, people don't remember things until they see it or hear it 7 times.
Yeah.
And that's assuming that they bought in the first 6 times you've told them. Usually takes close to 17.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at it, man, it's finding that ability to build in there and create your core values, create your vision, and then give everybody a role. And once you give them a role and a value, this is where you start sharing it with the parents. Like, man, we say it all the time. The strongest teams, the ones that we win, we've got a coach out here from Lindsay, Ontario. We were working with one of the best youth coaches I've ever seen in my life. He ran this place or his team like it was a junior program, and he was coaching AAA Pee Wee kids.
Right.
And, you know, man, with him, it was great because he communicated the vision to the team. He communicated the rules. And then what he went above and beyond and did was tell the parents of the player, this is the role your kid is playing. This is what we expect from him. We don't expect him to do this. We don't expect him to do that. This is the one thing. And any feedback you have for him, direct it towards this. We're going to take care of his development. You focus on helping with that side of it. And man, he created a team that was like second last place and flipped him into a first place team in the next year. And we're not talking substantial change. We're talking maybe about 4 or 5 players. The rest was the same carnage that he had from the year before. So if you have a vision, if you have something that you can say, we're accomplishing this together, you have some standards you're setting for the team, and then you've got roles for the players and you include everybody, you're winning at that point, man.
It's awesome. Yeah, because that's coming back to it. I think exactly like you said. It just when there is some kind of path, right,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's not just running all over the place and just kind of doing, run around with their head chopped off, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole mentality, and that's awesome.
Well, dude, even kind of to touch on that really quick, like going back to, again, the Last Dance stuff that's on Netflix, I'll keep referring to that because it's so easy to see.
Yeah.
Man, those guys talk about just one thing they wanted to accomplish, just one thing, and they put their heads down and work towards it, right? So it's like, if we're talking about the best teams in the world at the highest level winning because they have one thing that they're really executing, dude, imagine with kids. Like, kids are unstructured beings for the most part of it, right?
Right.
They need a lot of different kinds of push and pull and direction. And the skill of being a youth coach is having that patience to constantly give them the feedback that they need and constantly tell them about the role they need to play.
So let me ask you. So now, actually, that gives me a couple things to ask you. But how do you look at it from like, all right, so now you have the creative side, right? So if we're talking about youth kids, especially, again, it's depending on where we're talking about, right? Because like when you're talking about developing, in that development piece, how much is it like for the kid, right? Like at what age group are you looking at more creativity, less structure? And at what point does it transition from more structure, less creativity, as I said, kind of like you said, like in that role, like at what point do you think that makes an adjustment?
You know what, man? I'm going to tell you this, actually. I'm going to go completely rogue on this one, okay? If there's one thing I've learned from working with some of the world's top athletes across various sports, they never, ever, ever stop, in fact, from somehow developing themselves and bettering their creativity every day. Right. So if I see that, though, in a place where now you have to learn to be a role player, honestly, the role player piece, in my opinion, from what I've seen, comes into play when, things really start to get serious post-draft age, I would say, when you're starting to get into that junior level, and then slowly it creeps up, because the pro level, it's fine. Like pro level, it's simple. Find a way or make a way. Right. And that's where it's like balls to the wall. You got to be all out and do what you have to do. But if you're a youth player, I mean, a lot of people have this notion that, hey, you only need to play on the best teams in the league, and if there's no place for you there, you got to find a place for yourself. And it's like, no, you need to find a way to develop, and you need to find a way to play, and you need to find a way to keep pushing and driving forwards. And if you can't do that, like, what are we really doing here, right? I mean, I think athletes got to realize the best athletes in the world are selfish to be selfless. And I'm not talking about you becoming a jerk. What I mean is, you focus on bettering yourself so you can better other people around you. And if you're on a team where you're not able to better your talent and better yourself in a position that is right for you, what are you doing there? Just because you're going to play on the best team in the area? Why? You don't need that. I remember, Key, I'll tell you, from when I developed as a goalie, I went on the worst team, and I found the team that had the worst defense and the worst shots. And everybody was looking at me like I was stupid. And my father was the only one that was saying, you're going to get so many shots. Yes, you might get blown away like 5-6-0 a game, but you're getting close to 40 shots. You know how much you're going to develop on a team like that? It's ridiculous. And I went and found the worst team at the highest level, and I played on it.
Right.
And for me, that was where I was able to do new things. It was easy, right? Because then if I did make a mistake, didn't matter. We were already losing 6-0.
Right. It was a 3-0, so it made sense.
Exactly, right? Try new things, see what works and what doesn't. So honestly, man, creativity, in my opinion, it never stops. But if we're talking about where coaches start to put that funnel into place and really start making kids role players, it's probably going to be on the later end of a junior career.
No, I mean, one of the things I talk to the guys about is, so from a training standpoint, I'll use training for a second. I tell everybody, it's like hockey is where like we focus in on like that is who we connect, or at least for me personally, I know I connect the best with a hockey player. I grew up playing hockey. I know the sport in and out, from the ice, everything that comes into it. That's my essence.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking to a player, I know that, or when we're talking about development from a movement standpoint, my first step is, all right, let me make you the greatest athlete possible. I know that you don't, lay down, roll back, and pop up. And I know you don't do these different things. I know you don't do Ninja Warrior, and I know you don't do all this kind of stuff. But if I can make you move well and move and perform at a high level, now I can focus in on, for hockey, here's what I need to get you to do. First, if you don't have that foundation, then you lose the rest of it. So for me, I piggyback off that when it comes to the guys that we work with is, listen, what is your focus, right? Like, what are you really good at? So if you're really good at, penalty kill, right?
Yep.
Then be the best penalty killer possible, because every team needs a guy who, when that stuff comes in, they can make it happen.
Dude, 100%. Like I have an agent friend who's a little bit older school. He's about 60 some odd, I think like 62, 63 years old. And he was around for a long era. Like he's seen sports develop, not just with hockey, but with different sports as well. And he always used to say that too. He goes, you know what, Matt, like everybody's always going to need a defensive player. Everybody's always going to need a big imposing body. Everybody's always going to need that individual. Because I think that's where after junior, like if we look at trends, if we're talking specifically on patterns of athletes, we've seen a lot of players that, they light it up a good amount in junior hockey. Maybe not record pushing or breaking, but we're talking more than the average person. And they end up becoming a third, fourth line player in the NHL. That's normal, right? But again, that's where we're talking about that funnel. They were able to do the thing in junior where they could be creative and take the right things, the right steps. But now when we're talking about going into the pro side, that's where you have to find a way or make a way. It's a great example. I've got a player in San Diego who's trying to make his jump to the Ducks. And for the longest time, man, that this kid, he was always an offense first guy. And for this past year in his AHL, he had significantly less points, which was fine. It was his transition year. But he also adapted a game that the Ducks, or I should say the Gulls, want him to play, which was being more of that aggressor than he was used to. But once we were able, again, to connect it to that vision, we saw now that he can do both. And he added another element to his game, and he found a way to make it work. And that's ultimately why he's truly being considered as a player that's looked at for next year to go into Anaheim and really do his thing. So when we're talking about being able to adapt and having that ability to be the damn best at what you got to do, for sure, but always have that mind open to try new things. Like if you come in sometimes as a winger and you aren't used to playing the left side and you're dropped into a left side position, if I were to tell you that, you're not going to say, no, I'm not going to take my chance to do that and get to the next level. I hope you wouldn't. Right. Otherwise your vision really isn't strong enough, but you're going to find a way or make a way. So once you get on that tail end, man, I would say it's learning to play your role and doing it well, but it's also understanding that, hey, this is where I'm going to be, and nothing is forever, right? Like we've got a really strong player this past year we've been working with in the NHL, and he came in as a defensive defenseman, and now he's offensively doing well as well. People don't realize it's about a foot in the door mentality, right? Do your thing for the best possible amount of time, the way you know how to do it and the way they're asking you to. Build the trust you need to, and then you can adapt your game. It's, in fact, going to become a natural progression, because as you do your job consistently, you get more trust. And as you get more trust, you can take a bit more risks. That's how I see it. It's like, I really don't think, Key, that a lot of people truly realize that the best were not born with a gene. And it's something that I think has been a facade that was created a while ago. Like, man, let's look at the great Lionel Messi. Okay. People think that Lionel Messi became Lionel Messi because he had some kind of soccer gene. But if you go read his biography in the first like 30 pages, it talks about how he used to spend close to 8 hours a day training in the streets of Argentina with his brother. If you want to tell me that that's a gene of greatness, you're out of your mind. Same as the Cristiano Ronaldo, right? You want to talk about Cristiano Ronaldo? How often did that guy go play with his friend, the one he talks about with sporting and the car and all that kind of stuff that they go into? Again, his biography, you want to talk about greatness being a gene? No, man, he's a guy that works like a dog at what he does. Sidney Crosby, all you got to type in on Google is Sidney Crosby and washing machine or dryer, whatever it is. And you can see the picture of when he used to live in his billet parents' home and he was shooting pucks into a dryer every day. Like, we're not talking that this thing is a greatness gene, if you will, but everybody can do what they want if they truly obsess over it in the right ways. Like, I started as a strength coach just out of university, because I thought that's what I wanted to do, and I did, and I quickly transitioned out of that within a month. Mm-hmm. It's not that I didn't like it; it's that it didn't move me the way I wanted it to. This mental side did, and looking at it, it's like, man, you could do what I do, and I could do what you do, and it's no disrespect on that. It's the idea that we could each train ourselves to be better. It's having the mindset to do it in the right obsessive levels to keep pushing yourself to get there. Right. Even for athletes, man, you want to be one of the best in the world, go for it. But just realize the weight of the words "best in the world." Right. That's not a light term to take, right? NHL, it's 1 out of 4,000 that make it there. That's 0.00025%. So you better be willing to do 0.00025% people things if you want to get there.
With everything going on, is there a couple of things that you would, just kind of leave off the message today for guys that are, right now they're getting antsy at home, and there's guys that are, whether they are shooting pucks at home or they're doing that kind of stuff. What's something they can do from a performance standpoint, right? From a resilience standpoint. A couple of things that they could start kind of working on to put their game up right now, especially since they're home all day.
Okay. First and foremost, if you're an athlete that's breaking routine in any way, your vision wasn't strong enough. If you're an athlete that's shutting down because you're temporarily put into your house to stay there, your vision wasn't strong enough. I think a lot of people got to realize something. If you're truly looking at a long-term career, if you truly want to make it pro, this is a pinpoint in time. Plain and simple. This is, okay, let's pretend it lasts at the worst 18 months. Right. That's 18 months on an 18-year career. Come on. You know what I mean? So the first one being, make sure you're routined and make sure that your vision is strong. Write down what your vision might be. I know it sounds very simple self-help, but it's where you got to start with everything. Everything starts with the vision. Number 2, we call it the 1 out of 10 drill. We do this with all of our athletes. We look at things, we break them down, called zone days. So we got a zone 3 day, which is at the start of a week. Usually you challenge yourself. You do that stupid thing in performance, if you will, that has no real physical principle. But when you just work your face off and you feel like that swagger, like nobody can touch me now. I did this and you didn't. I highly suggest having that 1 out of 10 drill at least once or twice a week if you've got no performances coming up, where you can just absolutely challenge and dog yourself. And we call it 1 out of 10 because you should only be getting 1 out of 10 reps successfully completed. Now, I'm not talking about putting 500 pounds on the bar if you only squat 4 and hoping that's your 1 out of 10. No, I do not advocate that. What I'm saying is it's challenging yourself. For example, our goaltenders in hockey, we teach them about, there's this one player in particular that comes to mind. All we did this year was work the 1 out of 10 drill, which was him starting on one post and purposefully getting beat on his far post on his glove side to where a point where he would only make that one save out of 10. But now if we're looking at it in performance, that's a goalie that's going to sell out in a good way now. He's pushing himself always. So I would say routine. I would say constant challenge. Find a way to push yourself somehow. And it doesn't have to be big steps. We've got a player who's a big boy, a thick boy in the NFL. He's a lineman. And, his big problem is speaking up. So what his challenge is to go speak up when something isn't right. It could be something as simple as somebody cutting him off in the grocery store or him saying, I don't want to do this. That's enough of a challenge. You should be challenging yourself. And the last part, I would suggest limiting screen time. I think this is a time right now that a lot of people don't realize we're actually oversensitized, if you will, because we're at home and there are a lot of these Zoom calls and stuff. And although they're great, I think it's a part, man, that's taken away at times some autonomy. What do you do when you're bored? Well, Instagram. I finished my at-home schooling and whatever, and now I'm free. I can do my thing. And usually they go right to the screen. Man, get out. Just because you can't go and meet up with friends doesn't mean you can't go on a run or do something of the sort. You can. You absolutely can. It's just like I kind of said before, you find a way or make a way. Make a way. So 3 big ones. Find a challenge, build a routine, and limit that friggin' screen time, man. If you're oversensitized, it's not going to help anybody.
Yeah, it's funny. With all the Zoom calls that we're doing right now, because we're doing training online and or through Zoom and all that kind of stuff. And the other day, I took a look at between my phone and my laptop. Man, the amount of hours, my eyes killed me. My wife actually got me the blue.
Blue light, yeah.
But I'm going to tell you, I hope they better be working, because I'm going to tell you, it just they're driving insane. But Matt, listen, thank you so much for having for coming on, giving us some time, and anything. So I mean, we'll put your links at the bottom and the whole thing that way. But if anything else you kind of want to touch on before we kind of come out, or
you know what, man, I'll say this really quick, just kind of relating to us and what we do. We've got 2 things. So we've been pioneered at working with the mental game online. We have clients all over the world. All of our sessions are conducted over FaceTime or Zoom or Skype, whatever it might be. So if you are an athlete looking to raise it and raise your game, you can always find us. We work remotely with players all over the world. And secondly, I would say you really use this time as a piece to reload. I think a lot of people see this as a time to step back and reset. It's not. Like, let's be real for a second. If the NHL is talking about finding a way to get back right now, the NFL, the NBA, you're going to be returning most likely to sport in some way, shape, or form. You better be finding ways to innovate yourself right now. This is not a time to step back and shut it down. This is a time to turn it up when the weak starts shutting it down.
That's awesome. No.
Definitely.
Matt, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, man. Stay safe out there, all right? And
You too, dude.
hopefully we'll be talking soon.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure.
All right, awesome.